Well, thank you for everybody for joining today for this Automox and Rapid7 webinar discussing this newly released integration between the two technologies, releasing automated vulnerability discovery and remediation. We are going to cover a few aspects of the technology here. I just want to quickly run through the agenda. Quickly do introductions of who your presenters were going to be today. We'll do a product overview where we'll have some slides that will show what the products that are involved in this integration are. We'll actually do a demonstration of the products so you can see those in a live mode, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end of that. Just a way of introductions. My name is Scott Sager. I'm a Senior Alliance Manager here at Automox. Rob Webb is also joining us from Rapid7. He's a Senior Security Solutions Engineer, and Natalie Hurd from Rapid7, who is a SOAR Technical Advisor. We also have Adam Whitman, who is a Senior Solutions Engineer from Automox, and he'll be doing the demo portion of the presentation today. A quick way of housekeeping, just so you have an understanding of this webinar and what we're using. We're using On24 to be able to present this webinar. There is a presentation window that you'll have the ability to resize and make full screen, and you can adjust that as you like to see it on your screen. On the top right-hand side, there's related content where we may post items in there for you to be able to view different types of the content, white papers, other related material. So as you have questions or there's things that come up during the presentation. We would also like to hear from you during the presentation. We like to make these get a lot of feedback or get questions. Everybody is muted, so there's not an interactive portion of this, but this is your ability to be able to interact and to be able to ask questions. And so we would encourage you to be able to submit questions in that Q&A box there in the bottom right-hand corner. Then at the bottom of the screen, there is a bunch of links to a bunch of the social media pages that we linked to today. So if you want to learn more about Automox or Rapid7 or the different technologies that we discussed today, we would encourage you to click on those links. They're listed below. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into the presentation. And I just, before I hand off to Rob, I just wanted to just lay out a little bit of why we created this integration. What we found out there as we've met with customers and we've gone to market with technologies is that there's this differentiating of duties between SecOps and ITOps, and that becomes a challenge for a lot of organizations in the finding of vulnerabilities and then fixing those vulnerabilities. And so what we've done with this integration is merge these capabilities together of the uncovering or the discovery of the vulnerabilities and fixing them and speeding up the time of remediation. And so as we go through the presentation today, that is what we are solving for, is the uncovering of a vulnerability and the fixing that vulnerability in a quick and fast manner so that to be able to reduce the attack surface and the time to remediation that typically are happening in environments today. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand off to Rob Webb first to be able to go through the uncovering of vulnerabilities in your environment.
Thank you very much for that, Scott. Thank you very much for having me. Again, my name is Rob Webb. I'm a security solutions engineer here at Rapid7. I've been with Rapid7 for now 6 years, and a lot has changed with vulnerability management or the perception of vulnerability management since I joined Rapid7. Next slide, please. When we think about vulnerability management as a process, we think about starting with gaining visibility into your environment, like what assets are on my network. And we can discover that in many ways. We can use traditional scanning, we can deploy agents on assets, and we can integrate with other solutions like cloud solutions like AWS and Azure or VMware, plug into your DHCP or Active Directory and dynamically discover those assets in your environment. So we get visibility to the assets that you know about as well as the ones that you may not know about. And then from there, we have to perform some type of assessment for the vulnerabilities on those assets. Traditionally, again, using scan engines to find those the vulnerabilities on those assets, we can leverage the Rapid7 Insight agent as well. This is the process called collection, and this really hasn't changed all that much, with the exception of adding the Insight agent about 5 years ago. Scanning and assessment of vulnerabilities is not really evolved much. It's the latter half of the circle that we've really seen the way people perform vulnerability management change. In terms of prioritization is the first thing. We want want to look at the severity of the vulnerabilities on those assets, but we also want to take into account the criticality of the assets on which they live. And if you're not doing that, it's very difficult to define the SLAs for remediation, because that asset criticality is very important. Not all assets are created equal. And then we round the circle to remediation, right? And this is typically a process where we hand off from security to infrastructure, and we can remediate either manually or through integrations with patch management solutions, whatever they may be. Now, the problem comes into the fact that the old way of doing things is looking just at the vulnerabilities, right? We've evolved from that vuln-centric approach to remediation. We don't want to necessarily look at individual vulnerabilities for remediation. We want to take a more efficient approach, like a solution-centric approach, where we're looking at categories of risk, right? And then figuring out the solutions that are going to remediate the risk with the least amount of time, effort, and energy. And so for the past 5 years, I've been telling customers, like, we want to look at those solutions that have the broadest, impact on your vulnerabilities and reduce the risk the most, right? We don't necessarily want to look at individual vulnerabilities because a lot of times then you wind up, playing vulnerability whack-a-mole, and you're on that hamster wheel of death where you're just going around the circle and you're not really making any dent in the actual risk in your environment. But a lot of that has changed now. We're going to talk about that today and how we can use solutions like Automox to address those changes. But just to give you an example of one of those changes is I have a lot of customers now that come to me and say, hey, on top of looking at like severity as a criteria or asset criticality as a criteria, we want to look at individual vulnerabilities that are celebrity vulnerabilities, things that have made some kind of list, whether it's through our threat intel or whether it's through some kind of organization like, next slide, please, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Known Exploitable Vulnerabilities Catalog. We call that the CSIC-KEV for short. This is a great list that I've now, for the past year, I've been pulling vulnerabilities, CVEs from this list, writing queries in InsightVM and using those queries to filter dashboards so that I can then create remediation projects based on those vulnerabilities that the Department of Homeland Security thinks that I shouldn't have in my environment. And sometimes we want to look at individual vulnerabilities on that list if they're like brand new, they just came out and they're not part of a workflow that we've already enacted in our environment. And so in this example on the screen, I'm looking at this specific Microsoft Universal Plug and Play vulnerability, and I just did a query in my environment, and I found 409 instances of this vulnerability in my environment. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that I can easily create a vulnerability management, a remediation workflow where I can then target the solutions that are going to address these vulnerabilities across all the affected assets in my environment. But this still is taking a traditional remediation workflow. Someone has to log into the solution. Someone has to look at these lists of remediations. Now, sometimes we can push it out into ticketing solutions so they can work out of another ticketing solution, and every one of these solutions will get its own ticket and they can do the work there. But it entails someone either doing the work manually or manually pushing this work into a patch management solution. And this has been okay for the most part because a lot of times we're not, or we weren't as worried about 0 days because typically we're seeing the greatest risk from the vulnerabilities that have been around a really long time. The longer the vulnerabilities were around, the more opportunity the bad guys had to get good at exploiting them. So what we were seeing up until recently was that the majority of the vulnerabilities we wanted to worry about were the ones that folks had neglected, things that had been in their environment for a while, and they had a lot of time when it came to those 0 days to address those 0 days, because it usually took a while for the bad guys to ramp up and find ways to exploit them. And then Rapid7 had ways to watch and look for, attempts to actively target vulnerabilities through our collection of honeypots throughout the world. We have a project Heisenberg, which is, I think, 300 or 400 honeypots globally that gives us all types of intel as to, what vulnerabilities people are actively targeting in the wild. And so that gave us a little bit of a heads up on what we could do. However, we just completed our vulnerability intelligence report for 2021. If you go to the next slide, we can talk about that a little bit. So what it is our second annual vulnerability intelligence report is coming out on Monday, the 28th. Our research and Metasploit teams basically look at dozens of vulnerabilities and exploits every week to understand where the next big threat is going to be and where there are attacker opportunities. Once again, we looked at all of our data and all of the attack stories from the 2021 calendar year, and we put together a report that uses about 50 CVEs we've analyzed in depth as a frame to explain the overall vulnerability landscape has changed the past couple of years. One thing that Rapid7 has always done way better than competitors is that our teams really deeply understand vulnerabilities, and we can analyze and predict which vulns are going to be important to attackers. Now, we're kind of alone among our competitors in the VM space that, not only do we have that attacker knowledge, but we have tons of exploit development and offensive security capability because of our acquisition of Metasploit many years ago. So we package up all this research teams, expertise to help the customers, prospects, and pretty much the whole community understand what exploitation trends mean for them. Now, it's important to note that we as an organization, we hate FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We hate hype, and we never really want to give an unwarranted, quote, doom and gloom view of the security landscape. But with that said, we did see some things that very clearly in this year's data. If you go to the next slide, please. Mass exploitation went up dramatically. It's much more common today for vulnerabilities to be exploited at scale by many different attackers, whether they're ransomware groups, botnets, coin mining operations, and APTs. In 2020, we tracked just over a dozen vulns that were exploited by many attackers. That number more than doubled in 2021. Most of the threats in our data set weren't targeted to a small group of victims or of a particular industry either, or an industry vertical. They were mass attacks, which means there's a much higher risk to the average business and to big swaths of customer base than in years past. We also saw many more zero-day attacks where threat actors were using exploits in the wild before the vendor had any idea there was a problem. Now, there have been a number of articles the past 6 months or so about how zero-day exploits hit an all-time high last year. It's not just us saying this. More than half of the really big, very widespread attacks we tracked in 2021 began with a zero-day exploit. This is really unusual. Like I was saying before, in the past, it was like, yeah, 0 days are a thing, but let's focus on those vulns that have been in your environment a really long time. That's what the attackers are going for, the things you probably forgot about. So this kind of flips the script on its head. Overall, we saw the average time between disclosure and exploitation fall from, get this, 42 days down to 12 days. That's a month. And half of the CVEs in our report were exploited within a week. We aren't exaggerating when we say that this is huge. Lower time to exploitation means security teams need to reevaluate their program efficacy because they have much less time to remediate critical vulnerabilities and get compensating controls in place than they're used to. So the overarching trends in our data are that the attack volume is going up and the time to respond is going down. I think this is probably a good place to hand off back to Scott and talk about how this collaboration and the integration with Automox can help you address that.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate that overview. So I want to talk a little bit about what Automox is, just so you have an understanding of what our technology is, and then how this ties back into what Rob covered of what Rapid7 does of uncovering vulnerabilities. So Automox is an IT operations platform. So we have looked at the environments out there in that IT ops space, and what's happened in these worlds, as I mentioned earlier, is that security operations is out there, they're uncovering vulnerabilities, they're doing threat hunting, and then they're having to hand off to possibly other teams to be able to go out and to remediate a lot of these actions. So because of that, there's multiple tools that happen out there. A lot of the legacy technologies out there that happened within this space were VPN dependent, and a lot of them required a lot of on-premise hardware in order for them to operate efficiently. So we have introduced the modern endpoint management solution. It's a cloud-native infrastructure with zero VPN. We go across platforms, so we support Windows, Mac OS, Linux, and we support that across servers, desktops, laptops. It's a lightweight agent that we actually deploy out there on the endpoints. And so the deployment of those agents happens very, very quickly, and you can be up and running within a matter of minutes. And so as we patch and as we focus on the solution of this integration, We are specifically focusing on the ability to be able to patch and remediate these vulnerabilities that are being uncovered within Rapid7's environment. We are not a vulnerability discovery platform, but we are the enforcement of the remediation portion of that chain of being able to resolve those issues that happen or become uncovered. So as Rob really effectively pointed out, and we've seen the same trend happening, as that, this time to exploit is happening quicker and quicker. So what used to take in many cases, we found environments that's taken them weeks, sometimes months to be able to patch their entire environment. 90% of Automox customers are able to deploy their patches within under a day. So being able to have something quickly to deploy, not only patches to be able to actually roll out our environment and be ready to go within 15 minutes. And it's reduced the amount of labor costs that it's involved in that by 97%. So as we look at what we're doing, our ability to prevent these attacks is happening much faster. And the technology that we're leveraging to be able to do that is called vulnerability sync. The ability to retrieve or receive that data, that vulnerability data from Rapid7 into our environment, and then to quickly be able to identify which CVEs need to be patched in the environment and to be able to push those patches out. So as I mentioned earlier, 90% of our customer patches on 0 days are happening in less than 24 hours. So being able to speed up this time to remediation and being able to remediate in an almost immediate fashion is really reducing the attack surface that's happening in the environment. As we look at kind of the bridging of these technologies, we actually saw that there was a way to be able to make this even faster, as we were able to identify and say, hey, how can we patch or remediate these vulnerabilities? How can we do it in a faster manner? We decided that we would actually bridge this into other technologies. And this is where I want to bring Natalie in to talk about the InsightConnect platform within Rapid7. So Natalie, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. So as everyone just heard, right, both InsightVM from Rapid7 and Automox's solutions are incredibly powerful technologies, and they can help so much in their own rights in terms of what they're designed to do. But I think every organization then has to ask that question, right? This is a great example, but likely about a lot of different combinations of security and IT solutions you're managing in-house. How can you most effectively work between them? How can you combine the benefits of your discovery and prioritization and data providing technology with the solution that's really going to help you remediate most effectively and fastest? And so there's a number of ways you can think about doing that, right? As Rob touched on, the good old traditional method of just manually syncing data back and forth and uploading reports and doing things that way will get the job done. We have just found that there's a really simple way to offlift that type of work from human beings and allow an automation and orchestration engine to help you out and handle the processing of some of those repetitive tasks, so that not only can you gain some time back to be able to focus on problems that do require human brain power, but also then to cut down from hours to even hopefully, let's say, minutes of how quickly we can apply remediation to the vulnerabilities that exist out there. So next slide, please. So specifically, what kind of powers this integration under the hood and is sort of our glue that brings everything together is Rapid7 security orchestration and automation and response solution, InsightConnect. So for anyone who may not be familiar, it's a dedicated SOAR solution as part of Rapid7's overall platform that comes chock full of out-of-the-box integrations and templated automation workflows to really help our customers achieve value as quickly as possible with very little to most times no requirement to actually get down and dirty with the Python scripting. Ourselves at Rapid7 and even folks at Automox, right, have collaborated and have focused on the coding side of it, really to drive better, faster, easier outcomes for our customers. So next slide, please. And just so that everyone's aware, we're certainly obviously focusing on the patching and the remediation side of things today, but I do always just like to make sure folks are aware there are many areas in vulnerability management, and of course other types of use cases that automation can help achieve greater outcomes in your environment and get you some time back. So just thinking about the full vulnerability management lifecycle that Rob alluded to earlier, our customers who have implemented automation throughout their programs have seen these outcomes, right? So there are very easily measurable outcomes in terms of risk reduction and reduced exposure time, but some maybe a little less tangible, but still very effective and important in the environment is better collaboration and communication and just, people being able to work together easier. That is a little known, but highly valued benefit people end up realizing. And so just again, to kind of give you a little bit of a deeper sense of, what kinds of use cases power those outcomes, in addition to what, we're running through today in terms of the automation assisted patch deployments and remediation, there's plenty of other areas in terms of the data enrichment and communication aspects of the process. I alluded to this earlier, but you'll see on the screen here some of the pre-built templates that we ship and provide to our customers. We know obviously we work with organizations in many different industries and every size and shape and flavor of company that you can think of, but with all of that complexity and nuance, people are still facing the same challenges and they're working through the same or similar problems. And so what we've really committed to and are spending a lot of time on is identifying what are those use cases and kind of templated automations that we can provide to our customers out of the box to get them up and running for things that we know will likely be applicable to as many organizations as possible. Thinking in terms of how we can integrate into other sorts of technologies like your chat solution, where maybe your analysts or team members are typically working out of. Like Rob mentioned, how can we hook into your ticketing system to help facilitate some of the creation or management of those incidents that you're tracking and looking at there. So ultimately, what we're hoping to do again is kind of provide those templates to get you off the ground and then make it easy and give you the resources you need to make changes and tailor accordingly to what your organization needs. And finally, just to give you a little sense, and if anyone would like to, I always encourage them, take a second after we're done to visit the extension library here. This is Rapid7's public-facing marketplace of all of the out-of-the-box, integrations and workflows that we provide to our customers. I really can't stress enough the most important aspect to this is these are vendor-managed integrations, right? We don't put that responsibility on our customers to figure out how to interpret and build scripts and work between 70 different APIs. That's something we have a dedicated integrations team for, and also some, very nice vendors like Automox and some of our customers even that have started to contribute to that repository. And so what I want to, make sure everyone takes away is that we really want to move you right along that process. Worry less about needing to know how to script out things and manage that internally, and more so use the power of a SOAR technology that gives you a central language and a repeatable user experience for how to set up and leverage and use these automations, and then consume the outcomes from them as well. So the library holds, a vast number of integrations and use cases, but something we're obviously very excited for is the integrations that are available between Rapid7 and Automox today. So to kind of transition things over, I know we're real excited to run you through a live example of this, and something Adam has hooked up for us. So I think next slide, Scott, we can pass it on over to him.
Thanks, Natalie. And hello, everyone. My name is Adam Whitman, and I'm a solutions engineer here at Automox. So I wanted to take some time today to cover how Automox and Rapid7 are using these two powerful platforms to streamline the CVE process. Now, as a lot of you already know, this can be a very painful process where the security team identifies CVEs through vulnerability scans and then passes a task over to the IT ops teams for the remediation process. And the reason this legacy process has been not very effective in the past is due to the time it takes to identify the CVEs and remediate it by identifying the vendor patch that addresses it, the disconnect between SecOps and ITOps on what CVEs need to be remediated, and also reporting that lets you know how the CVEs were addressed and when. Due to this disconnect, security teams are seeing more and more vulnerabilities infecting their devices. Automox and Rapid7 solved this disconnect and created the first of a kind, fully automated vulnerability remediation workflow utilizing Rapid7 InsightConnect automation with Automox vulnerability sync capabilities. So with InsightConnect, workflows using this Automox vulnerability sync plugin can identify and fix vulnerabilities the moment they are discovered in your environment. And this really allows your IT ops team to take the time back and focus on other tasks while the CVE remediation process is fully automated. This process also ensures that you are quickly eliminating risks those vulnerabilities and exposures pose to your endpoints by offering methods to instantly remediate the CVE as soon as it's discovered. Now, during the demo, we're going to highlight vulnerability remediation process between Automox and Rapid7, but we also use InsightConnect to help automate other things like ChatOps workflows. With this, you can quickly query a device within Automox and get the results directly from your chat tools like Slack and Microsoft Teams. So imagine being able to take your device's data out of Automox and being able to use it for other automations like alerting. These are just some of the powerful workflows you can accomplish through Automox and InsightConnect. So again, today we're going to take a look at this in action during the demo. But just so you understand from a high level what exactly the workflow is accomplishing. The workflow streamlines the CVE remediation process by automatically ingesting CVE data gathered from InsightVM and passing that data into Automox vulnerability scan via InsightConnect. From there, Automox quickly gets to work by identifying all packages where those identified CVEs are fixed and listing them into a single view. Then, vulnerability sync can automatically remediate the CVEs by immediately installing the respective patches for each CVE. You can also see the patches being applied at a later time, so you can work within the remediation process that you have within your organization. This is the first solution to offer this level of end-to-end remediation for CVE vulnerabilities that are identified on your devices. All right, so without any further ado, let's see this actual automation in action. So I quickly want to start within the Automox console. And where we're starting is the task module. So this is where you're going to get that single pane of glass view into all the CVEs that can be remediated in your environment. And we're getting a lot of this data out of InsightVM so we can populate the information in our vulnerability sync feature. All right, so let's take a look at InsightConnect. So most of you are probably familiar with this, but this is the actual workflow automation tool that we're going to use to get that information out of InsightVM and pass directly into Automox. Now, this Automox vulnerability sync with Rapid7 automation already exists. So if you go into InsightConnect, you can use this automation with the various plugins that are available to fully streamline this process. And the example of this workflow is here. So you can see that we have descriptions created, what their features and requirements are, so you can get all the information you need to effectively run this automation. And if you view this in the builder, you can actually see what we're doing. And you can see that we're using the InsightVM plugins with the Automox plugins in InsightConnect to automatically gather that data as soon as you kick off a query within InsightVM to get that CVE data. So it's an automatic process. As soon as you do that scan within InsightVM, the workflow gets to work and starts populating that information into Automox automatically. But for our demonstration today, we're going to go ahead and just run a job that we've already completed, just to kind of show you how easy it is to just kick off these jobs and to populate that information into Automox. Now, again, if we go back into Automox, you'll see that no CVEs are currently populated. But as soon as we run this automation, it's going to start querying that list of CVEs that we get from InsightVM and then populating them into our tasks feature. So let's go back. Let's take a look at some jobs that we've already run. So here's a job that we've ran that's orchestrating this workflow. And if we actually view the full job, you can see the actual steps that were taken and the information that we pulled out of that InsightVM data. So you can see that we found 5 different CVEs. We have 5 different tasks that were accounted for and populated into Automox. So then we can instantly take action and remediate those vulnerabilities. And the great thing about this orchestration is when we run these jobs, it tells you exactly in the process that we're at throughout the workflow. So as soon as we gather that CVE data, it's going to tell us when that's done, and then it's going to start the next job. So let's go ahead and rerun the job, and it's going to start populating that information automatically for us. So as the job runs, you can see that the job kicked off successfully. The job is currently running. And as information starts to populate and we start gathering information, it's going to populate the different steps throughout the workflow as we complete each task. Okay, this shouldn't take much time at all as this populates. Okay, so now we've generated the CVE report. So now that information is going to start being passed into Automox, and we're going to start populating CVEs. All right, so it looks like the workflow is done running. As soon as it's done running, we can go right in here to Automox. What we'll do is just quickly refresh the browser. And now we can see those CVEs that we've gotten from InsightVM are starting to populate in our vulnerability sync feature. So this is a really good thing because what we're doing is we're going to be able to index all those different CVEs so you can take action immediately on them or use those CVEs to identify the patches you need to install so you can take those software packages and start testing them in your workflow environments. So you don't have to instantly remediate these CVEs. You can do your proper testing across your endpoints to make sure they don't cause issues before you start rolling them out to your production devices. So let's take a look at one of these CVEs that we've identified. So CVE 2018-0886. And if we click on that, what it's going to tell us is for each device that has the software package where that CVE fix is contained under, we're going to populate it here under this single view for you. And as you can see, we have found 2 different packages across 2 devices where the CVE fix is contained under. So by doing this, we're really taking a lot of the legwork out of identifying the CVEs based on your vulnerability scan and just automatically querying that data and populating it into Automox. So the ITOps team doesn't have to go through that painful task of getting a big list of CVE data from the SecOps team and then manually having to go through, identify the software, and install them. Automox just does it all automatically for you. So you can do it right off the bat, or you can wait to orchestrate that through a patch policy in your own orchestrations. But for our example, we're going to go ahead and just immediately run the remediation so you can see how quickly and effectively we can remediate these software updates via the tasks. So I'm going to go ahead and click Run Now. And when I click Run Now, it's going to take that job that we found from InsightVM, and it's going to install those 2 software packages on those 2 infected devices. And you can see any of these different things that you come in. If we have different batch files that we bring in from the CVE data, they'll all be populated here. So you can approve those if you want to then take those tasks and run with them. Okay, so let's take a look at these devices within Automox. All right, so let's take a look at that device in Automox. And if we click on that device, we can now see that this device is actually installing that update for us. So just by clicking that Run Now button within Vulnerability Sync, it automatically kicks off the job to install that one software update. And if you scroll down and look at all the different software that is available to install on this endpoint, you can see very easily that that CVE ID, the 08861, is contained under this cumulative update. So right now, Automox is installing that cumulative update to ensure that CVE is fixed across my entire environment. All right, well, I hope that demo was informative and you saw the power of the Rapid7 and Automox integration when it comes to remediating vulnerabilities passed from InsightVM directly into Automox. Scott, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you.
All right, thanks, Adam, for the demo that we just did, and appreciate all the Rapid7 people and everybody else that joined for the webinar, and all the backend people that helped make this happen today. We did have some questions that came in throughout the webinar, so we have a time to be able to answer a few of those here. So let's start with the first question here. Is it possible to modify the pre-built automation workflows? And Natalie, I'll hand that to you to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And great question. So yes, any of the pre-built automations, any of the Automox or any of the others that you can find on our library are completely customizable. You know, the hopefully nice part about having the template is it allows you to, you know, take kind of the work that Rapid7 or even, you know, some of our partners or customers may have contributed and do a little bit of reverse engineering to kind of see how they designed it to be built. But if you notice after you've, you know, run it a few times, hey, I actually want to expand it to do this, or I want to modify slightly some of the filters that I see. Our goal is to make that easy. And that's something you can just do visually in our workflow builder without needing to muck around with the scripting much.
All right, thanks, Natalie. Looks like I have another one for you or Rob here. What kinds of push notifications could I have InsightConnect send after it's done running the workflow?
Yeah, and that's actually a very common use case why people end up modifying templates and making changes, is because, you know, a lot of organizations find that there might be one system that they kind of prefer to receive that push notification in. You can certainly, you know, work out of InsightConnect and review the data and the automation outcomes from there if you wish. But a lot of our customers have noticed, you know, hey, we're already in the practice of taking in, you know, updates and details in our chat technology like a Slack or Microsoft Teams. Some teams prefer that to go to their ITSM. Some people still prefer email, right? So whatever works best for you. Those are all very, very common and robust integration points for InsightConnect. So again, it's really simple to kind of take that template and add a quick step that says, hey, you know, once I wrap up deploying the tasks in Automox, I want to send a confirmation message to my security team within Slack, letting them know, you know, here were the things that got pushed out, here were the assets impacted, some of those kind of relevant details.
Thank you. Next question is, if we set up proactive patch policies within Automox, will it reduce the amount of CVE data that appear in my vulnerability scan report? Adam, I think that'd be for you.
Yeah, great question. So the answer is yes. You would, you know, reduce the amount of CVEs that you see in your vulnerability scan that you get from Rapid7 if you have a good patching cycle and good patching workflow already set up in Automox. Especially around the Patch Tuesday timeframe. You know, Microsoft is releasing new patches during the Patch Tuesday timeframe, and those, of course, have different CVE IDs that are tied to them. So if you're patching right around that timeframe and doing your testing up front, then you're going to see a lot of CVEs reduced in your vulnerability scans, because the back end, you're patching those different vulnerabilities on a regular set schedule that you've set up in Automox.
Okay, thanks, Adam. And the next question is, how fast will the remediation of the CVE be when you click the Run Now button within Vulnerability Sync? And I think that's for you also, Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. So that remediation happens immediately. So as soon as you click that Run Now button, our agent is going to issue a command to all those different devices that have that CVE available to install and immediately patch it and install. And by doing so, mitigating the risk of that CVE ID exposure. So from that action, it's pretty immediate.
Okay. I think this is a good lead into the next one. Why wouldn't customers just apply all patches to all discovered vulnerabilities? Rob, I think that'd be a good one for you.
Ooh, that's a really good question. And we get this question a lot. I think it comes down to the fact that the modern IT infrastructure is really a complex patchwork of software and hardware and services and other systems working in a complex symbiosis to achieve a very delicate balance of reliability, efficiency, and security to serve the needs of the business. I think many customers are probably fearful, and probably rightfully so, of just pushing out patches broadly across the entire environment without any type of testing or QA, because they could very easily upset that balance and cause disruption to the business at large. So I think it's important to be judicious in the application of such automation workflows. And in fact, at Rapid7, we're careful to call this automated assisted patching to make it clear that human interaction is required and probably very much desired before just pushing out those patches broadly without any type of oversight. Adam, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, Rob, I definitely agree to that. We just don't want to push patches out as soon as they're available to install on a device. There's different things that we need to do to check to make sure that that patch is not going to cause issues across your environments. So, ring deployment is a really important thing to pay attention to when you're pushing these patches out to your production devices. So making sure that when you apply that KB that Microsoft tells you to install to mitigate those risks, we got to do checks and balances across those different patches in our test environments to make sure that they're not going to cause issues when we start rolling them out to our production devices. So, Automox is really good about ingesting all that data from Rapid7 and making sure that we populate that information in the console to let you know what CVEs need to be remediated. And you can take action immediately on certain patches, but just having that information in Automox and being able to test those patches appropriately across your devices is something that we offer within Automox and really recommend it to all of our users to make sure that they're not causing unnecessary issues across their devices by just simply applying patches as soon as they're available.
Thanks, Adam and Rob. So I think we are actually out of time today. We appreciate all the participation and appreciate our presenters as well, Natalie, Rob, and Adam. And if we didn't get a chance to be able to answer your questions during the presentation, we will reach out via email to be able to answer those questions for you. All right, before I let you go, if you are interested in booking a joint demo with Rapid7 and Automox, all you need to do is complete the demo request form. It should already be open next to the related content window in the webinar console. If you don't see it, navigate to the lower icon menu and click the button on the far right to open it. Click yes and then submit, and our teams will reach out to you to coordinate a time that works for you. Plus, for meeting with us, we will send you a Yeti tumbler. Thank you for joining us today, and appreciate your attendance and support. And we appreciate all the speakers and all their expertise for all that they provided today. For attending this webinar with us, you will receive a $25 Uber Eats gift card via email following today's webinar. So be on the lookout for that. We thank you again and appreciate your support and look forward to working with you more in the future. Thank you.